Yeah, baby. Guess what's back again? The Gunn Show. That's right. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, this is not about muscles and it's not about weapons, although sometimes it gets into that. And for those of you who know me, I don't have any muscles. We know that. I travel too much. I haven't been to the gym. Well, I try to do push-ups from time to time, but this story is not about me. This is about my buddy, Joe Sullivan. Good old Joe. I've known him for a little while now, and I'm really honored to have him on the show for many reasons. Joe Sullivan is an inspiration for me. When I started the podcast, I knew about the manufacturing executive podcast that he had started before me and the great value he brings to the industry as a whole for manufacturing, engineering, marketing. He's just really great at that. He's a guy, if you haven't connected with him on LinkedIn, please do. All of his posts will want you to learn more about what's going on, pick his brain about how those wheels are turning in there, what those hamsters are running on those wheels all nights. And he tells me these days he's not sleeping much with a couple of young kids and could value some more sleep. So maybe we can help him with that. But for those of you who don't know, Joe Sullivan is also a thinker and founder of Gorilla 76 since July 2006, 15 years, over 15 years at this point. So if I could please get a round of applause, even though I can't hear any of you out there, although I wish I could. Maybe we'll do this live at some point. A round of applause for my buddy Joe and welcome him to the Gunn Show. Joe Sullivan, you're a gentleman and a scholar. Thank you for joining us. This is the Gunn Show.
Thanks for having me, Tony. That was an intro unlike any other I've had. So,
well, like the conversation you and I have had before, and the great pleasure I've had to be on the Manufacturing Executive Podcast. This one is a bit more laid back, and we have a great time. It's like you and I having a bite to eat. We haven't seen each other in a while, and we're bumping into each other on the street. So let's start this thing off, man. This audience loves the authenticity of who we are because it's rarely something that we get into, right? We're talking about how we can make our business better, or what machines or what products. We always talk about technical specs, which, to be fair, is important. And we will talk about the manufacturing executive, and we will talk about G76. We definitely will, because we value what you've done, what you've grown, and how you inspire others in the industry. But we also really, truly love getting to know people. And that's a more rare condition these days. So, Joe, as far back as you want to go from your childhood or your teenage years, or if you want to start at university, or you feel like to share, launching your business in 2006, wherever you want to share, start embracing the audience with who you are and showcase those talents, my friend.
Cool. Well, I guess I got it's kind of a wide open floor here. So why don't we go back to, we'll call it the late 80s. I'm 39 as of this year, so born in 82. But my childhood was I was an art kid. I was always drawing. That was kind of my unique ability. I think growing up was that. I played sports and stuff. Basketball was a big part of my life all the way through high school and stuff. But I think if playing third string point guard in high school was probably more of a, second fiddle to the fact that I was good at art and I loved it. And I think I knew as a kid, grew up in Wisconsin and Milwaukee area. I think I knew as I got into high school, probably that's where I wanted to probably take my career. If I could make it work and be something other than a starving artist. But so I, kind of as I got into high school and explored architecture, explored graphic design, things like that. And I kind of fell in love with graphic design. Frankly, wound up going to school in St. Louis, Washington University, specifically for that, and kind of confirmed that's what I wanted to do. And kind of leaned into that, started taking some business classes, and it's funny, like if you ask, I feel like 90% of the people you ask, like at the beginning of college, what do you think you wanted to do growing up? And, when you're done, and I think I would have told you I own a graphic design firm, which frankly wasn't that different from where I wound up starting out. Our company's grown and evolved, but yeah, that was kind of me. And so, out of college, well, when I was an intern, actually, after my junior year, I met my now business partner, John Franco. We were interns at a big marketing agency called Zipatoni in St. Louis. That was about a 250 person firm. There were like 10 interns that summer that did a lot more partying than we did, marketing stuff. But it was a blast that summer. And me and John became friends. And as we got into our senior year, started looking for jobs. He was a writer, I was a designer, and we had sort of complementary skill sets to try to get into advertising. And so we helped each other put together our portfolios and wound up landing jobs at different agencies here in town. But we started doing freelance work immediately. My first job out of college was I started in June of 2006, and then we founded our company 1 month later in July of 2006 as a nights and weekends thing. That after a couple of years, we kind of, I was living in an apartment at the time with like two of my college buddies who were working various jobs after school, and I think we were splitting $550 a month rent between three guys in like a 600 square foot apartment. Like, I was in the bedroom. One of my buddies was in the living room, and the other guy was in this like hallway / dining room thing. And so that was like the first couple of years of my career, like basically zero obligations in life, zero expenses. And so starting a company and quitting my job to start a company was about as low risk as it would ever be. And so while we were probably idiots doing it, we we made the leap after a couple of years, me and John, and we launched our company, which we are still running today, which is called Gorilla 76. And so we've had this, it was probably 10 years ago where we probably around 2010, 2011 or so, where we kind of looked around at our client base and said, mid-size B2B manufacturers, like these are the companies that we really like working with. It probably made up half, maybe a third to half our client base at that time. Other clients were just whoever with, the hair salon down the street and the barber shop that was like my, a friend of a friend, and, the local restaurants and stuff. But we looked at like what we really liked doing. And there was something about people who made stuff with their hands. We had a couple of construction companies in our portfolio, a few small manufacturers, and we just decided to kind of own it in the industrial sector. So I am not an engineer. I was not a machinist. We have found our way into the industrial sector and have been embraced, and have some great community that we've kind of become a part of, and we've built our expertise there over the last 10 years. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today.
Matsura Machinery USA Incorporated, located in St. Paul, Minnesota, is a U.S. subsidiary of Matsura Machinery Corporation in Japan. Since 1935, Matsura has been the forerunner in designing innovative technology and manufacturing solutions to a variety of industries around the globe. Matsura Machinery USA Incorporated delivers unmatched excellence in 5-axis, vertical, horizontal, linear motor, multitasking CNC machine tools, and machines with a powder bed metal AM platform with machining capability. Matsura Machinery USA Incorporated provides the service, applications, and technical field support that have always been the Matsura standard for business. For more information on Matsura products, please contact marketing@matsurausa.com or visit matsura.com. It's an awesome story. I mean, I always place myself as someone who's listening to this podcast going, wow, what would they want to know more about? But you named about 30 things I want to know more about. So if it's okay with you, I'd kind of like to go back a little bit. You mentioned third string basketball player. I don't know why that didn't pan out, first of all. But then you mentioned art. Art was your love. And I know that you went to Washington University in St. Louis for advertising, design, art, and marketing. And it looks like you went from 2001, 2005. So growing up, and you said you kind of were pulled toward the graphic design side of things. Growing up, were you painting? Were you coloring? Were you drawing? Was it always on a computer? Because you also mentioned mid 80s, which is around the same time I grew up. And I remember that annoying digital sound of the AOL dialing up. You've got, so maybe.
Yeah, we all know that one. Yeah.
So I don't imagine it started as graphic design. How did that part of your artistic journey go?
Yeah, that actually is kind of a funny story how I found my way into graphic design, because I didn't even know what that was, frankly, until I think it was like my sophomore year of high school. I was like, architecture interested me. I just, when I was growing up, I loved drawing buildings. I don't know why. I'd like go, early in high school, I'd go around town and I'd like shoot photos of buildings and then I'd draw them. And I loved like old classic architecture and stuff like that. It's something about architecture interested me. And I remember I signed up for an architecture class my sophomore year as like an elective or whatever. This is high school. And I show up on the first day and it was not architecture class. Like they had like misplaced me, and I was put in a graphic design class, which I was like, I don't even know what this is. But it was, the teacher kind of went into what the curriculum is and what we're going to be doing. And, there was like some logo design and there was some, like typography type of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, it sounds interesting. I guess I'll just roll with it. And I loved it. I kind of fell in love with it. A lot of it was just by hand. There was no computer involved here. This would have been probably 2002. And like, yeah, we had computers in our high school and stuff, but it was not, like this was before, Steve Jobs came back to Apple, at least I think. It was probably right around that time when like, what you have as a graphic designer today was none of that was really there yet. So it was a lot of, by hand, very meticulous stuff and using pencils and rulers and things. But I loved, I kind of fell in love with that. So when a couple of years later, I'm looking at going to college, like that's kind of what I wound up seeking out, and just confirmed that's what I wanted to do. And it's funny, like, I've gotten along the way, or people like, oh, like that. My artist friends like jokingly, would call me a sellout for winding up in marketing and like in the business world. But I kind of look at it as that art skill set is what kind of helped me get to what I'm doing now, which frankly I love. So
I like that. That's a fun journey. So you Wolf of Wall Streeted it for a little while with almost zero responsibility, with 3 roommates hanging out on the couch, the bedrooms, and you said almost zero risk. You also mentioned. And you said this a couple of times, so it must be meaningful. You said, I'm not an engineer. I've not been on a shop floor, but you've been doing this for quite a while. And so understanding the navigation of the waters and how marketing might work together with your company. Although I've kind of jumped ahead of some topics that I want to talk about, I would like to talk about that beginning time, that courage that it took when you believed in yourself. And you said it was less risk, or at least at that time, there might not have been an opportunity with less risk at that time than hopping in with a couple of friends. And you mentioned Franco, which, not the guy from the movies, I don't think, or his little brother, but, probably equally as significant in your life. I want to talk about what that courage is like to believe in yourself, to launch your business and kind of see what would happen. Because I know there's a lot of people out there that have skills and have ideas and thoughts, and sometimes we just need to give them a little bit of a push. And I think your insight would be very valuable here for someone who's riding that fence and needs that gentle little touch over to the other side to kind of go out on their own and give it a try.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. And like, I not to discredit the jump we made or anything, but like, my little sister is 3 years younger than me. Like she runs a really successful pastry shop and like cafe and pastry shop in Milwaukee that she launched, probably at age 31, 32, like more responsibilities in life. There's a physical location. There's rent that's got to be paid every month. There's equipment she had to buy. She had to find investors. And I'm like, I've got a lot of respect for what she did, because there was a lot more risk involved, and a lot that could go wrong. I look back to where I was, and though I felt brave doing it at the time, I was, we were 23, we were in our first jobs, and I described my living situation. I had, I've got 3 kids now. I didn't have any, obviously, at the time. I had, I was not yet married. And so it was, I think what was at risk? Well, I had a good job, and I left the job, and we did it when, John and I had been building our sort of a freelance business on the nights and weekends. And I remember we can vividly remember the day where it was a general contractor in Edwardsville, Illinois, which is just kind of on the Illinois side of St. Louis. And they had, they had like a GC, they had a home builder, and they had a real estate development company all under their portfolio. And we had been talking to them about doing some work, and then they wound up hiring us to do work across all 3 companies. And at the time, like, I think it was about $30,000 worth of work over like 3 months, just to give you some context here. And John and I looked at each other like, okay, we can quit our jobs now. Like, we could pay ourselves for like 3 or 4 months and survive, and like have food and be able to pay our rent or whatever. And so that was the moment where we'd been building towards that. We'd been planning for it and stuff, but it kind of all of a sudden like happened. And so, we put in our notice at our jobs and made the leap. And we were like, all right, we got 3 months to live on if we can't land a single another piece of business, but we will along the way and keep it going. And so that first year was kind of like, all right, let's get to the next 3 months, And, but it, as far as the push it took, I mean, it's kind of what we wanted to do. We certainly planned accordingly. I can remember we in the probably the year prior to that, like, we literally bought one of those yellow like dummy books, like business plans for dummies. Like, we literally bought that book, and we would sit down on Wednesday nights. We'd usually go, for anybody who's listening that knows St. Louis, we'd go down to the Delmar Loop, and we would usually sit outside. There's one bar that we'd go to, and we'd sit outside. We'd order a bucket of PBRs, and we would sit there and we would work on our business plan while like drinking 50-cent beers. And that's like how our business sort of emerged. But we did, I mean, we were diligent about it. Like, we planned, we looked at what could go wrong, and like, built out a projected, profit and loss statement. And one thing that was nice in our business, as opposed to my sister's, which I described, is like, we're in an information business. We needed our brains and a computer, frankly. And that would be enough. Like, didn't need a physical location, didn't need to hire anybody. So, in that sense, it wasn't like an earth shattering, like crazy leap to make, but we did it, and we're probably dumb for doing it, but like we did it, and then just kind of took a year at a time, I guess. I don't know.
When was the last time you thought about work holding? How long did it take you to change over the clamping devices on your CNC machines? Days? Maybe hours? Don't let work holding be an afterthought. With the Heimbuch system, changeovers can be done in seconds without readjustment of the runout. No longer do you have to turn down jobs because you don't have the right work holding. When flexibility is critical, add a mandrel, 2 or 3 jaw adaptation onto your collet chuck. Use it on your turning and milling machines. With such a low maintenance system, you will see less machine downtime and your profits will soar. To learn more about the Heimbuch system, visit www.heimbuchamerica.com or call 414-358-9550. The ignorance is bliss thing comes up a lot, right? And you were fairly young at that time. You think about 2006, a couple of years as an art director, and then, realizing this is what you wanted to do and jumping into it with your PBRs. I think that's a fantastic story. But also you might have been at an age, as you've already kind of mentioned, where, you didn't own the houses and the cars and have the family. And so you were able to do that. So well done on that courage, and well done on seeing that foresight to jump in. You mentioned in the beginning, it was kind of like, the barbershop down the street or whatever kind of local businesses were around that you could work with. And then you kind of navigated more into, mid-sized B2B manufacturers, this type of industry, right? What was, other than just, you mentioned enjoying how people tinkered with their hands and making things, What other benefits have you seen from working in an industry that a lot of the listeners know, coming back to the show regularly, that we have a skills gap in this industry, and a voice like yours is very powerful with Gorilla 76, allowing people to spread a voice of awareness and hopefully reduce a skills gap that's quite significant at this time. But let's describe a little bit about G76 as a whole. You've mentioned a little bit of how you've grown throughout time and what it's become today, but let's talk more about what it's become today and how you can support the industry as a whole where you currently sit.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, basically we're a marketing agency, right? And we've just sort of evolved to niche down into working with mid-size B2B manufacturers. I think the best move that I made on the marketing front, because I kind of, my business partner, John, kind of heads up the people side of the business, hiring, retention, employee professional development. And we're a team of 22 now, and he manages, he kind of oversees the people side for the most part. And my responsibility is mostly marketing and sales for our company. And probably the best move that I made on that front was when I launched our podcast a year and a half ago, frankly, because which is, as you mentioned, is the Manufacturing Executive. You've been a guest on it, awesome guest, had a really great response to your episode. But when we launched the podcast, this would have been June of 2020. The first episode went live. So I think I've recorded 72 episodes every single Tuesday. I've had one go live since. I got some really great advice from Dan Sanchez at Sweetfish Media, which is a company that produces our podcast. And I had planned to do a show about industrial marketing for manufacturers. That's my expertise. It's our agency's expertise. Let's teach about industrial marketing. But the advice I got from Dan and the Sweetfish team was, don't do a show about marketing, because if you want to interview manufacturing leaders, they don't know a damn thing about marketing. And it's true. And they were saying it without any knowledge of manufacturing, but in general, that statement is even more true in manufacturing than it is in any other industry, where you have very sales heavy organizations, where traditionally marketing has meant trade shows, and it's meant print ads, and it's meant maybe some pay-per-click or whatever. But it's a lagging space in terms of marketing versus sales. Sales, manufacturing tends to be really, really strong and heavy on that. And so the recommendation was, make your show make it broader than about marketing, because then you can interview leaders of manufacturing organizations so they can be resources to their peers around the issues that are affecting their businesses. And, over the last year and a half, I mean, the launch of the show corresponds almost directly, not intentionally, but with just the pandemic, kind of rising and dealing with that. And then along with that comes, amplified problems with supply chain, with hiring, with skills gap. So a lot of my conversations have very naturally wound up revolving around those topics. It's some of it I set out intentionally for that to happen, but I've also had, I do episodes about sales and marketing where I bring in people from outside manufacturing, the authors of sales books who can lend perspective to manufacturing leaders. I've had private equity firm partners who talk about M&As and exit strategy. I've had people on, in the technology side of the business and robotics and automation who, can apply what their expertise is in the manufacturing sector. But largely my conversations have been with manufacturing leaders about the challenges they've had and the issues they've had. And what that has done for me, there's been a benefit to me. And I think there's been a benefit to my audience, as I know, because I hear it from them. For me, it's been the best market research I've ever done, frankly. My clients being in their facilities and talking to them, it's great. I've learned a ton over the years from, just being inside of manufacturing facilities and having regular conversations with clients. But, we work with 10, 15 companies at a time. For me to now be able to branch out and talk to a variety of different manufacturing leaders with different backgrounds and to learn what's going on in their organizations, it's been the best market research I've ever done. Feel like I finally have a pulse on really what's going on with my audience. And the benefit to my audience is I'm able to conduct conversations where CEOs or VPs of sales or, engineering leads or whoever can share their experiences with their peers and talk about how they overcame this challenge or that challenge, or how they accomplished this thing or have dealt with this struggle that, other companies are dealing with. And it's been really well received. So, some of the topics that I think have been that I've gotten the best feedback on, or anytime I've touched something like related to the skills gap, had Andrew Crow and Justin Sherman on. I know, those guys, and talking about diversity in manufacturing from a variety of angles. And I can't tell you how many people said, "Oh my gosh, thank you for interviewing these guys. Like, I've learned so much from them. I'm reaching out to them now." And all I'm doing is putting a spotlight on the experts. You prepare for, to have a good conversation, and then you put the spotlight on them and let them do their thing. And I, not that that my intention is just for me to benefit from this, but it's a natural to align yourself with people who are, it naturally does good for everybody involved, them, me, the audience. So I think that's probably been the most influential thing in terms of like trying to establish a presence in the manufacturing sector, is literally just getting out and talking to people. And I just hit record. Like, that's really that's what you're doing now, right? It's just, that's the best part about a podcast, I think, is just being able to talk to people with different perspectives, and then because you're hitting record, you can bring that out and share it with other people too. So
we're now spotlighting the guy that spotlights people is what we're doing here, right?
There you go. Yeah.
Well, I've found that growing up, I had, probably equal opportunity as a lot of other people, but grew up in somewhat of a more struggled environment than a lot of others might want to go through as well. And once I had the opportunity to see the world, experience from an educational, sitting in a school from high school kind of platform was sort of thrown out the window. And I'm going to come full circle here in just a second, Joe, I promise. But having the opportunity to explore other people's perspectives and cultures and, foods and whatever it might be, I feel like when you launched the podcast and when we launched the Gunn Show, there's a very similar appetite for that absorption of information, right? Well, we're taking in other people's perspectives and personalities and knowledge. And we get to, like you said, spotlight the real experts, and all we do is hit record. I can only imagine, and you've said this, but I like the topic, so I'd like to continue. Imagine all of the different stories and growth that you've had, that you've learned and grown from since a year and 5 months, I believe now, and releasing one every week. And congratulations to you on doing that. I can only imagine the amount of growth that you've incurred over the last year and a half, absorbing this information from these brilliant people.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing for me is just, it's the learning and hearing different perspectives and seeing what's really going on inside the manufacturing community and specific organizations. And what's been really cool is like, as a consultant to companies in the manufacturing sector, like, you feel like a little bit of an imposter naturally, like, and especially early on. But it's been really cool how the manufacturing community has sort of embraced. I come with good intentions. I'm not coming here and trying to just sell people stuff, right? Like, I'm trying to build relationships, of course, to help my business. But if you come in and you genuinely try to create value for this manufacturing community, it's been really cool to be embraced by people who are, like you, who actually come from like a machining background, or people who come from an engineering background or whatever. So I don't know if I anticipated people sort of welcoming with open arms, but I think if you can come in and you can shed light on the issues, and like you're giving me a virtual hug right now, right back at you. That's I don't want to say it's been a surprise, but it's been like, almost a really somewhat unexpected positive, is like, I feel like I'm part of the manufacturing community at this point, which is really a cool thing.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not the first to say. However, let me say you are by no means an imposter, and anyone who decides they want to work with you will find great value in what you do. And I appreciate that. I'd like to move on, if it's okay with you, and actually bring up one of your recent posts. And and it's a LinkedIn post. So for those of you who are listening and you're not on LinkedIn, get on there. That's where the decision makers are. That's where all of this incredible knowledge is being passed around. And although, photos are fun and cute little videos are fun, we share a ton of information on LinkedIn. So hop on if you're not. We'd love to have you. But I'd like to talk about something you recently posted, and I found a lot of value in this. And I love to watch kind of from a bird's eye view the interaction that you create through some of your posts. And you're going to be familiar with this because it's one of your recent ones. And I'd like for you to expand on it verbally, because as great as you are at typing words and creating text and improvising from there, I'd love to hear it voiced as well. And it's this post you made, and if it's okay with you, I'm going to read it. Because I want to get it right. And it says, I've always tried to repurpose content for different media channels, but over the past year, I've reversed the order of publishing in these different channels. And here's what I mean and why. Prior to 2020, I used to write a long blog that might have 4 subsections, turn each of these 4 sections into short form LinkedIn posts, summarize the blog post, and turn it into an email newsletter. Since 2020, I write a lot of short form LinkedIn posts, observe which ones I get significant engagement on, turn those into deeper pieces of content for other media, use LinkedIn posts almost verbatim as my newsletter content meant to be consumed right there inside the email. Now, I personally agree with all of this transition massively, doing it before and after as well. But I would love to hear the expanded version of this for the listeners so they know why this transition happened from your perspective.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to talk about that. So, to frame it and give a little context, especially to those who maybe are listening and may not be maybe marketers, or which probably a lot of the audience, or have a lot of experience with content marketing. I and my company, we're huge advocates of the idea that your best marketing is going to come from tapping into the expertise of your subject matter experts' brains. So your engineers, your salespeople, the people who interface with your customers and hear directly from them regularly what things matter to them, what things matter in their buying process, what issues they experience in their jobs when you think about your customers, what things that those people are trying to achieve. And then how can you lend your expertise and experience to that to help them, to be a resource to them, so that, when they enter their buy cycle, you're the first one they think of. You're already positioned as a thought leader and an expert in front of them. And that's really the brand of marketing that we preach and help our clients implement. But so with that context, the post you just read sort of speaks to the shift that I have seen, and we as an agency have sort of observed over the last few years, where if you were talking to me 5 years ago, I would have been talking to you probably a lot about SEO, or search engine optimization, and writing long form, deep content, publishing it on your website, content that addresses the stuff that your customers care about, frankly, talking about, product comparisons or long-term cost of ownership of doing something this way versus this way, or how do you get to ROI on this type of, investment. And so, I'd have been talking to you 5 years ago a lot about how do we get discovered by people who are going to Google and looking for answers and, searching questions around this stuff, trying to get answers, trying to figure out what they need to do in their buying process. And that's still important. By no means am I saying it's not, but creating that kind of content, like deep, expert, exceptional content, like there's no way around it. If you're going to do it well, it's going to be expensive. It's either you're going to invest a lot of your team's time, and what engineers on your team want to sit down and write content for 8 hours or have time to do that, right? Not many. I see you shaking your head. And or you can outsource it. You can hire an agency like us, where we've got journalists in house, and we can help you produce that stuff by interviewing your team and extracting knowledge. And again, advocate of that still. But the cost of doing that, whether it's your time or you're paying somebody else for their time to do it, to think of like consistently publishing content week after week after week. It's a major commitment. It's a financial commitment. It's a commitment of your time. And a lot of that stuff, frankly, is going to flop, or it might not flop. But 10 people are going to see it. And then it kind of, sits there on your site and collects dust. And so the post that you just referenced, Tony, what we've seen working better and what I'm an advocate of is, as opposed to saying we're going to write a 1,500 word in-depth piece of content and publish it on our website every week for the next year, why don't you instead, the 8 or 10 hours it would take to produce that, why don't you produce 10 or 15 really great LinkedIn posts that touch on a variety of topics that also, matter to your audience because you hear it from their mouths and from customer, phone calls and calls with prospects. Publish short form pieces where you can get that stuff out there on LinkedIn, whether you do it organically or put a little paid budget behind it to distribute it in front of a very specific audience that you're trying to reach. And then you react to what content is actually resonating, what content that you're publishing people are commenting on. There are things I publish that I think are going to explode and they get 5 likes and 2 comments and fade into, the black hole, never to be seen again. And I'm like, okay, I thought I had something there. Well, I'm glad I didn't invest 10 hours writing a long form piece on that because apparently nobody cares. And I thought they would. And then, something else I'll publish may be the opposite where I'm like, all right, I got to get something out there today. And I'm like, all right, I had this conversation with a customer yesterday. Here's a little takeaway from that. And the next thing you know, it's circulating and it's got, 4,000 views and 120 likes and 55 comments. And like, clearly there's something there. So that's market research, frankly. Like that is taking something that you think may matter to your audience and getting validation on that from the way people respond to it. And then I might take that post that took me 30 minutes to write, and I might say, let's do a podcast episode. I'm going to go get another expert on this topic, and we're going to debate this on camera, and then we'll distribute that out as a podcast. Or I might go and write that long form piece, or I might turn it into my newsletter that goes out to 4,000 manufacturing people every 2 weeks and get it in front of people that way. So the purpose of that post that you read was, as opposed to committing to these major in-depth marketing efforts, especially with content, do a lot of short form stuff and test it and see how people respond to it and learn from that, and then kind of build on that. And it's a more effective, efficient use, I think, of your time and your marketing spend.
Modig Machine Tool was founded in 1947 in Sweden with a focus on building best-in-class machines. The family-owned company develops, engineers, and produces premium machines for high-performance machining in leading industries including aerospace, automotive, energy, and construction equipment. The Modig machine series are all designed and built with high-quality rigidity, high dynamic stability, and precision technology modules. The common denominators that give Modig machines the flexibility, adaptability, and versatility known as the Modig differentiators. Learn more with www.modig.se. That is www.modig.se.
Yeah, I don't know that I could agree more, honestly, Joe. And I'm so glad that I asked that question, because your answer was perfect. And I think it's educational. And I think that's really going to bring value to the people who are listening right now. And I'd like to transition from that into the significance of websites. And the reason I would like to talk about that is because, as you've mentioned, over the last 5 years, when you talk about search engine optimization and everything that goes along with it, right? We're playing this constant game of what's going to be the best moving into the future. Let's not remain stagnant. And what has flipped, and how do we study these algorithms, as you've mentioned already as well. So I've personally found that a lot of people, the majority of people, the first thing we do with almost any subject is we go to Google, right? I think Bing's almost a dead thing, but we go to Google, right? And what does Google bring up? Well, it typically brings up the articles that you just mentioned that you've written, or a YouTube page, possibly LinkedIn, just based on relationships and partnerships that Google has. But ultimately, what each site is doing is Google connects us to the information that allows us to learn, right? To educate ourselves. And then if we like what we've heard, read, or seen, we then go to that company's website. But that website is going to be the ending factor to see if you get a phone call, an email, or an inquisition at all, right? It's going to be, is that website inclusive? Does it give the technical aspects that video or that article inspired us to take us to that website? So I would like to hear your perspective of where a website can do a company the most service and how it will really support them on any kind of investigation from a potential client?
Yeah, great question. And my perspective on this has definitely changed over the last couple of years. So I think that I'd have told you anytime over the last 10 plus years that like your website should be a resource to your audience, and that hasn't changed. Like you should think of your website as the best source of information around your area of expertise for the exact not for everybody in the world, for the people you are really trying to reach and do business with. So you need the content there that is your product pages, your service pages, the industries you serve, things like that. That stuff should be there. It should be there to help people find what they're looking for, frankly, who are in a buy cycle and trying to gather information. It needs to look professional. It needs to, you need to, it's like your storefront, right? You have a crappy sign on a storefront if you're a retail business that's like, falling off the building, or the lighting's bad, or, it just looks like the crap. Who's going to walk in, right? So, I think there's an element of that that's gets a little more subjective, but and then, I've always been a huge fan of a learning center or a resource center or a blog or whatever you want to call it, where you're actually consistently publishing thought leadership content of some sort. Could be written content that addresses questions and helps solve problems, like I was talking about earlier. It could be, we take our podcast episodes and we summarize them with some show notes and drop, that content in there. We write content, we film video content. So like that's sort of it's a learning center, right? It's there to help educate our audience and demonstrate thought leadership in the process, but it's not about us and what we do. It's just focused on the audience. So all that stuff works together, especially when you're being vetted, when you're actually being vetted by somebody in the buying process. Now, I want to come back to Google for a minute, because you talked about that. And I think this is where maybe I've started to change my perspective on this over the last couple of years. So if you think about it, I will often say that probably for most companies, when you think about your buyers, your audience, probably 1 to 3 or 5% of them are actually in a buy cycle right now. And I think this becomes more true the more big ticket your solution becomes. If you're like a machine builder or some piece of CapEx equipment, or even a service that is, there's an investment there. Like if you're selling a commodity, a small, a high volume of small priced items is a little different. But a lot of the companies we consult are, they're machine builders or CapEx equipment or like some kind of contract manufacturer, but big, $10 to $100,000 plus deals and stuff. And so if you think about it, how much of your audience is actually buying right now? Probably a small percentage, but you probably have a large audience. And so the way you have to think of Google versus other channels is like Google is what we would call an intent channel. People go to Google when they have a need. Think about it in your personal life. When you're like in buying mode for something and you're trying to investigate it, you probably go to Google, you go to your peer network, you maybe look at reviews, but people go to Google and they have, they type in the keywords that are related to, something that they need or are looking for, getting more information around. And so whether it's organic search, like showing up naturally in search engine rankings, or putting a paid budget behind it, and running pay-per-click ads in Google, you're really in Google largely appealing to people who are in a buy cycle and have buying intent and are looking for a solution right now, which again is a small percentage of your audience. And so, and then, in those cases, you want to be found by them. So you got to put in the work, the organic, search work, probably having a paid budget running with pay-per-click, so that when people are looking, they discover you, and then you drive them to the appropriate page on your website. Not just your homepage, you drive them to the page related to the thing they were looking for. And you have great content there that can funnel them into, filling out an RFQ or a consultation form or whatever it is. But then you look at the rest of your audience and you think of who your ideal customer profile is. And you look at the rest of that audience and say, okay, well, what about the 95 to 99% who aren't buying right now, but might be in a day or a week or a month or 3 years? Frankly, it's your job to be demonstrating expertise in front of the rest of them, to be building awareness, to be building a position of trust and credibility, so that when they do enter a bicycle, either you're the first one they think of and they just pick up the phone and call you because you've been teaching them all along the way and creating value for them. Or when they do go to Google, because they're now in a bicycle, you show up there and they recognize your name more than they recognize the 2 or 3 that are even ahead of you. And they click on you first because you've been putting in the work. And so that's like really what we believe in, is the role of content marketing and publishing expertise, whether it means written or video or podcast or infographics or webinars or whatever. It doesn't matter. They play to your strengths on that front, but that's your job, is to be a household name, so that when your audience goes into a bicycle, they go to you.
You just made my heart so happy. That is such valuable information. Oh man. So we've learned today you're an artist, a semi-pro basketball player, a little bit of Wolf of Wall Street in you, a courageous dude that launched a business, a valuable asset to the podcast and marketing community. And you've slid into the manufacturing, engineering, industrial world. So I would like to close this out, if that's okay with you. From your journey and at this moment right now where you are, what is your most inspirational or most exciting, or I don't care, just something that brings you joy about the industry that you are currently working in the industrial world? What do you look at when you go to a trade show and you go, that is amazing, thank you for creating that, or whatever it might be? I want to hear your perspective from a marketing side of things that jumped into this industrial world. And we value the person that you've become to help us be that bullhorn, create an awareness for all these products out there. We value you in that. But I'm also equally as interested to go, what do you value about the industry that we're creating for everyone out there, right? Because we're the ones making cars and planes and the equipment for the doctors and the phones we're playing on and all that stuff, right? So it's always of great value to me to hear your perspective on that as well.
Yeah. So this is actually a pretty easy one for me to answer, because I think about it a lot at this point. And I think what's super interesting to me is the energy. You're a part of this for sure, but the energy behind solving what is probably the biggest problem in manufacturing right now, and that's the skills gap and labor shortage, right? Like I've talked to so many people with so many different unique ideas about how to address this. And everyone I talk to has so much energy and enthusiasm and passion about it. And so I'm going to name a few right here. So, I mentioned Andrew Crow and Justin Sherman earlier, like trying to attack this from a we have whole sections of our population in the United States that would never even consider manufacturing because they don't even know it. They just never would even cross their mind. And I think a big part of this is the perception of factory and what that word means. And I'm about to interview Kathy Walker from eCami in Kentucky for my show. We did a pre-call yesterday, and she brought that up. Like the word factory has so many old negative perceptions about it. And everybody talks about the, dirty, dark, dangerous perception of manufacturing. And it's just true. It's like, it's very clear to me that when you look at, trying to bring in either, parts of our population who traditionally haven't been a part of manufacturing, the African-American community, or, you look at women, just in general, women, like this percentage of manufacturing workforce, both, in C-suites and on shop floors that are female is very small. You look at, bringing in what is now Gen Z, and their parents' perception of manufacturing is so influential on them, right? You talked about that one with me, Tony, when I interviewed you. Is like when your parents are just trying to send you to four-year college, or if not that, not into manufacturing, to something else, whether it's retail or it's whatever, like people don't want their kids going into a dark, dirty factory, and that's what they think of. But, you look at let's look at what's happening with Industry 4.0 technology, with AI, with robotics. I've interviewed, some folks, Ryan Lillibridge from Mission Design and Automation, who's a client of ours, Eric Nieves from Plus One Robotics, had Aaron Prather from FedEx on my show. And like all these people are they're at the forefront of robotics and what can happen there. Jake Hall, there's the technology side of manufacturing is fascinating right now. It's so interesting. And that in itself can solve a lot of problems if we can expose people who don't know anything about manufacturing to what technology jobs are available, for example. So there's that. I've heard, I've talked to, I had Matt Goosey from up in Northwest Wisconsin, who runs Cardinal Manufacturing, which is a job shop inside of a high school. Like they're teaching kids in their regular high school curriculum alongside math and science and, language arts. They're teaching them machining. And like that kind of stuff going on. So I think there are just a lot of really interesting, unique perspectives and people that are doing some really smart stuff to shed light on what careers in manufacturing could be. And I think the more that's what's gotten me excited about running the podcast is like that. If I can help that issue, like then I feel like I'm having an impact on an industry, a huge part of our economy that I can do have a little piece of that by just putting a spotlight on the people who can make those changes. So that's my long-winded answer to what excites me about being in this space.
You are welcome to go long-winded whenever you want, brother. But I know we have to close this out, and that was a great way to do it. For those of you listening, my friends, thank you so much for listening. This is Joe Sullivan, thinker and founder of Gorilla 76, and the amazing podcast voice behind the Manufacturing Executive. So, Joe, thank you so much for being a part of the Gunn Show. We appreciate you very much. Wishing you all the success moving forward.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity, Tony. Come talk to you anytime. So thanks for having me.